Hello everyone, and welcome back to Compulse. Okay, now I already know what you're saying. Jordan, it's been so long. It's been so long. And yeah, it really has been so long. Hold on, 5 months. Oh man, yeah, that's quite the while, I'd say. But I was originally gonna have it out sooner. Maybe when this episode 8 was around 2 months old, I would have the next episode out, but I got a bit carried away and all, but I am here finally again, and yeah, we're going to do the next episode of Compulse. So, welcome to Compulse episode 9. Now, this one, I believe, considering how many organisms I made, this one is going to be a pretty long one. So strap in and get some snacks, I would say, because this one's going to be a long one, I would say. So let's jump right in. So this was the original map of Compulse, and as you can see, it wasn't it's alright, but it's not the best. So I changed the map up a bit. And you might be wondering, well, what do I mean by this? Well, I redrew the map. The map now looks like this in the new age. We are now in the middle of the Parsa era. And as you can see, ice caps have been growing steadily. However, even though the ice caps are growing, volcanic activity is on the rise. So, we would have to watch out, especially in places like Melos and South Tongules. Volcanic activity is on the rise. Now, the lagoon has sort of become stationary. It's no longer really visible from space, however, it still houses the deepest point. And Kamara, yeah, that is slowly heading towards North Tongules. Now, of course, most biomes still retain it, like the shrublands, which are pretty far out into most places. And, well, the lush savannas as well, which are dotting around many islands and other things of the sorts. Now, the main focus for this episode is going to be the ocean and the islands. However, we will also be covering South Tongules in this episode. Now, across many islands, there are vast jungles. And these jungles are very inhabited by many species, as well as the mudlands, which are now coastal swamps. And they still thrive. The flower fields too. The flower fields also thrive. However, they're also the flower stalks, which are basically a sort of tree. So, yes, the biomes are still flourishing, but the Arctic and the snow deserts are still growing, so we may cover that in the next episode. And temperate forests are also expanding due to the regional cold. And the temperate forests may spark temperate rainforests. Who knows, But they still have a pretty diverse array of life. And yes, it's giving a more new age in the middle of the Parsa era. While volcanic activity is on the rise and glaciers are starting to expand, it's still a pleasant time for something incredible to happen. But maybe I shouldn't go too deep in it. Now, we will be covering Axrillis first. It was originally a part of Kamara, so many of the Kamara fauna are now on the Axrillis island. Now, Axrillis is a very dense jungle-like area, and is very tropical in climate. The barking chameleons are a species that have been thriving at this island and are one of the few that actually are the ones that made it to the island. The jungle thornamillion also managed to make it to this island. The lemurmillions too. The shrub singers as well. The sailed shrub singers too. And yeah, the swamper flies as well as this swamp crocomillion and the giant walking pictus. And, well, the walking chameleons. So yes, these creatures are present on Xrillis. So I wonder how they could diversify on this island. Now, the dominant plant life is actually the Gimbo Limbo tree, which have diversified into the Mega Gimbo Limbo. The Mega Gimbo Limbo are the largest Gimbo Limbo trees and the first descendant of the Gimbo Limbo trees. I really like that name, Gimbo Limbo. But now they are thriving in the new Xrillis tropical ecosystem. If plants are going good, how are the animals doing? Now, like I was saying, in these tropical jungles, it is very flourishing and very frolicky. So, let's go ahead and dive right in on it. This is the first organism we'll be talking about today. This is the springamillion. The springamillion is a very strange organism. Now, as you can probably tell, these organisms are descended from the hopping or walking chameleon. And, well, yeah, they have developed a posture very similar to that of an earth kangaroo, and also move very similarly by hopping, using their tail as almost a third leg. So these creatures are basically if a chameleon and a kangaroo had a baby. They also have a very similar size. Now, as far as niches go, these guys fill in a niche similar to a deer, being very skittish and oftentimes mainly grazing on grass, as well as sometimes the fruits, like bananas. Bananas make up a large portion of their diet, as well as leaves. But they don't really eat leaves. Instead, they're mainly frutivores. But other than that, they have a personality like a deer. And these guys are relatively common around the Xrillis jungles, jumping around in small little packs sometimes. Females will sometimes travel in packs in order to stay safe, while males usually travel in packs so once they reach a female pack, they can compete with one another by scratching with their claws and puffing up red. So you can find these organisms relatively commonly among these beautiful, lush jungles. Now, there has been a rule with many islands known as Foster's Rule. This means that when a large animal gets on an island, usually because of lack of resources, they get relatively smaller. But when a small creature gets here, they usually get bigger. A similar thing may happen on Xrillis. So you might be wondering, well, what do I mean by this? Well, I mean the hopping or walking chameleon were originally pretty small, but now they're relatively large, around the size of a kangaroo. And this is another organism that has grown quite large, I would say. This is the knife chameleon. The knife chameleon is, well, a descendant of their beautiful barking chameleon descendants. Or ancestors, should I say. Now, these organisms have developed a sharp, saber-like tooth on the front part, like a sharp incisor. This is derived from the original barking chameleon's sharp razor-like egg tooth that they've now took into the extremes for ripping through flesh, but they also use it for another purpose. This tooth can puncture major arteries and blood vessels, as well as nerves. This could paralyze the prey or cause it to bleed out rapidly. And when this happens, they usually only have to wait for death among the organism and then begin feeding. It's a very startling premise, and these organisms can track blood for miles. So, at this point, there's practically no way you would be able to escape these organisms. And these organisms are very similar to Komodo dragons, except they're not venomous like Komodo dragons. But, in fact, when females lay eggs, their infants usually have to climb trees, because the adults can be cannibals and will feed on young. And it will happen, very much so. And it's very startling. So, if you're on an island, mainly Xerilus, because this is where the only thing they're native to, and you're bleeding, you might want to get that wound patched up real quick, or you're gonna have to say goodnight. And, well, while these life forms now have an upright posture similar to mammals, they're still cold-blooded and are very aggressive. They also still retain their barking-like habits due to the complex vocal structures of the barking chameleon. Take a listen to the knife chameleon doing its barking to establish dominance. And as you can see, they do similar barking-like behavior in order to mark territory. So these are very, very deadly predators and are the top predator in these beautiful jungles of Xerilus. Now, what are some other life forms that have been diversifying and evolving on Xerilus? Well, the jungle thornamelion have been, and they've actually been thriving in this new tropical beautiful forest. This is the beautiful clawlamelion. The clawlamelion is a very one-of-a-kind organism. Now, due to no competition with the birds, they have actually developed something very interesting. They've become bipedal, convergently evolving with the walking chameleon, and have a posture similar to a dinosaur. Now, on their cousins, which were these large behemoths on Kamara, they had a developed tint divot in the tail. They also may develop this mutation within the jungle thornamelions. So, they may adapt this sort of dent into a sort of claw. This claw-like apparatus allows them to grip through branches with their tails, and it's nice. Now, these organisms also feed on the trees, similar to the springamelion. Now, this may result into niche participating or something else, so the creatures will then have to compete to do so. But this is not entirely the case. The springamelions are frutivores and feed on mangoes and bananas, mainly feeding on bananas. However, the clawamelion will mainly feed on leaves and grasses, and occasional insects and small animals in the forest, because they are omnivorous. So, they will not have to compete with each other. So, they can sometimes be found near each other, but who knows. The claw chameleons are actually relatively aggressive and do not like company. They will let out a terrifying rumble when they're agitated if a species is getting too close to them. Take a listen. So as you can see, they make a sort of growl when potential threats are near, somewhat sounding like an alligator. So this can usually scare off potential threats that come too near, and it would scare me too. They're also, while they have a sort of claw-like thing on their tail, they're not the most intelligent, only being about as intelligent as some average animals, which can be intelligent, it's not extraordinary. So these guys will probably not be making cultures and art and weapons and spaceships anytime soon. So luckily we don't have to worry about these chameleons with hands on their tails diversifying into great things yet. Keyword, yet. So these strange dinosaur-like omnivores are still thriving in these hot jungles and using their strong tails and claws to defend themselves against the knife chameleons, which knife chameleons predominantly feed on the claw millions. However, they'll also feed on the spring millions. Now, the lemur millions. The lemur millions have been, well, they have been adapting. They do not go down from the forest floor and become ground-dwelling lemur millions, unlike their cousins on tongules and tongules. Instead, they'll keep to the trees, as they can jump from tree to tree and swing, so they don't really have to come down to the ground as much. One of these organisms is the cimamillion. The cimamillion is actually a rather intelligent organism, and instead of being entirely cold-blooded, are actually mesothermic, so a happy medium between cold-blooded and warm-blooded. Now, they've actually been seen to show relatively high intelligence. Now, you might be wondering, well, how? How can they show high intelligence? Well, take a look at this image right here. You can see a rock in the hand. That's right, they've begun to use primitive tools. These primitive tools are mainly just simple stones that they collect from the forest floor, occasionally when they go down there. And when they grab them, they can use it to smash invertebrates, and also to smash hard-shell bananas. Hard-shell bananas are poisonous, but their flesh inside is not poisonous, but the outer layer is. So if they get rid of that, they can eat the banana freely, which can show a high intelligence, even sometimes teaching it to their young. Now, their intelligence is similar to a crow, very similar to the strillamillions on strills, and are developing very high intelligence for something on Compolus as of yet. Most intelligent creatures on Compolus have been birds, like the elefowls, which are literally sapient. But I feel like some chameleons may develop this a bit further. I mean, after all, this is the world of chameleons. So, could some chameleons reach sapience? Who knows? And like I said, they have developed actually relatively friendliness to each other. Most reptiles do not feel love or affection, but these ones do, even teaching simple tools to their children in the next generation in order to help them survive. So they're very different, but they're very good at what they do. So I believe the cimamillions may thrive in the new jungles of Exrilis, hunting small invertebrates and smashing fruits. I believe that they may lead to pretty good things in the future. And take a look at this gorilla. He's smashing what is that? I think that's a bug. They do this very similar thing. Sometimes the rocks can get even sharpened, allowing them to stab more stuff. So they may begin to actively sharpen the rocks to do so. But they're not sapient yet. They still have a little bit to go, as they're still only about as intelligent as a crow, which are relatively intelligent animals. Now, another lemurmillion is the spleemer. The spleemer is a very strange lemurmillion. Now, all lemurmillions have developed spikes. Some of the lemurmillions have lost the spikes, but they still retain their spikes, and they use it to their advantage. Now, they use the spikes in order to defend off potential threats, like cimamillions, as cimamillions actually compete with them and even kill and eat them, so they're actually in a constant fight in the trees. So the spleemermillion, or the spleemers, have sharp spines that they use to whip the cimamillions in order to make them go away. Now, on par with the cimamillions, they've also developed a rather keen intelligence, similar to that of a crow, and have similarly developed mesothermic blood-like lifestyle, so between warm-blooded and cold-blooded. Now, they similarly can use basic tools like rocks. They've also been seen using twigs. These twigs they then attach to their already long tongue, and then they stick it into small holes in the trees in order to extract small invertebrates that may be rummaging through the tree. Very similar to a chimpanzee, even sometimes teaching it to the next generation, similar to the similarians. Now, with this high intelligence on the rise, who knows what could happen in the future of Xrillis? It may lead to very interesting things in the near future. Now, well, the lemur millions are definitely thriving in the trees. Some life forms are still dwelling at the bottom of the trees. So, what are they? Well, in the bodies of jungles, there can be canals and rivers. In these rivers, fish can swim through, like pictus catfish, like schooling pictus, pictus sharks, and the sucking blood pictus. And these fish can thrive within there, feeding on the abundance of freshwater snails. And one special type of butterfly may take advantage of this. This is the hook fly. Now, the hook fly is a very strange organism. Now, these organisms are descended from the swamper fly and have developed their proboscis into a long, segmented hook. This long, segmented hook is used for fishing. That's right, they fish. Taking a look at their body plan, they have mastered the convergence evolution. On their body is blue, and blue and white pigments. So when fish are looking at them from below, that was a voice crack, they will see blue and white, so they will think it's the sky. However, when they're being viewed from above, they have a brownish color that mimics the murky water of rivers and lakes, so they can usually stay hidden. So they hunt very efficiently, oftentimes sticking their hook in the water, waiting for fish to try and grab it. And once that happens, the fish get their mouths hooked into the hook. They are then dragged out of the water and pinned down. And females do this in order for one main purpose, to lay their eggs in, very similar to tarantula hawks. Once they lay the eggs in the dead fish's carcass, the larvae will hatch out and dig into the riverbed. It's kind of nasty, but that's how it works, and at least they'll have a full meal when they hatch. So, a very strange insect, especially one that comes from a beautiful butterfly. Another small creature that is frolicking around is the dwarf shrub singer. The dwarf shrub singer is a descendant of the shrub singer and have developed small attributes in order to fit through the thick of the jungles. The dwarf shrub singer is almost like a tiny little goat and are very cute. They are very similar to the Java mouse deer, and they have convergently evolved similarly. Now, they still live in small little herds in order to protect individuals, and they still make their tiny, small little calls. Take a listen. They make these calls in order to communicate with one another. These organisms mainly feed on small insects and grasses and small tubers, but that's about it. They don't really feed on anything else, mainly frolicking around, looking for food or potential mates during breeding season. And they're actually relatively abundant within the jungles of Xrillis. And where there's abundant prey, there must be predators, right? Well, what could hunt such a small, innocent creature like the dwarf shrub singer? besides something like a knife chameleon. However, knife chameleons will probably only eat them if they're desperate because they're not worth the trouble. But what is something that will actively search them out for food as a main diet? This. This is the snagglemillion. The snagglemillion is a descendant of the formerly savanna-dwelling crocomillions, or the Suchians. Now, they are small and dwarf-like. To hunt their small dwarf-like prey and fit through the thickness of the canopy. They have developed an upright posture similar to their Suchian ancestors and can run quite fast in order to catch their small dwarf shrub-singer prey. You can often find these organisms similar to foxes, slowly sneaking through, looking for prey, and once they find a herd of dwarf shrub-singers, they will stalk them and wait until they see an elderly member, sick member, or small baby that has been left behind the herd. And once it is, they'll pounce and start eating the prey. Now, small, they are descendant from the Suchians or swamp crocomillions from the mudlands or the savanna swamps, and thus still are thriving within these jungles. They still are cold-blooded and are about as intelligent as a crocodile, so they probably are not going to become sapient, but they are still thriving, and who knows, what they could become in the future. But still, they're relatively small and hunt their dwarf shrub-singer prey. Now, we're gonna move over to this guy again. Okay, well, what is this special about him? Well, you see, even though I was originally gonna leave them behind, I think I should say something again about them. They can indeed communicate to each other over long distances with small little chirps. Take a listen. They communicate with these small chirps in order to somewhat mainly for mating, however also to intimidate rivals and to assert dominance. So you can oftentimes hear these chirps. You'll know it's from a snagglemillion, a small crocodile-like cat creature. Now we move over to the lush, savanna-like shrublands. Well, the shrublands and savannas have the same fauna and same plants, so they're basically intertwined at this point. So, we'll basically be covering those same biomes in this bit right here. It's a very lush and barren land, so it's not very lush. A couple shrub trees here and there, and drive-through grass and small cacti. But other than that, there's nothing there. Except for, well, animals are still thriving and have found ways to adapt on the exuilous savannas and shrublands. One of which is the tripod chameleon. The tripod chameleon has also convergently evolved a giant kangaroo-like body plan on Exrilis, very similar to their springamillion cousins in the jungles. And like I said, they are very similar to a kangaroo, but they're also very similar to a dinosaur. Well, mainly dinosaurs that were back in the olden times, because the tripod chameleons mainly would probably drag their tails on the ground, similar to the old depictions of dinosaurs. And these organisms are still thriving. Unlike their jungle cousins, these ones are not as skittish and are a bit more neutral. They're mainly chill and will mainly just be basking or feeding on cacti fruits or the leaves of shrub trees. However, if they are provoked, they will attack, letting off a sort of battle cry before they do so. Take a listen. So yeah, they will let out a loud battle cry in order to assert dominance and fight So they can be very gnarly and aggressive when needed, and they can use their tail as a third leg and also as a whip. So they're not the most pleasant to fight against. And they're actually relatively common among the savannas and shrublands. You can often find them anywhere. They're not relatively social, but you can often find them together during the mating season, in large groups. I wonder what they could arise to. Maybe large, desert-dwelling, dinosaur-like creatures in the future. Who knows, you know? So, while the tripod chameleons are thriving, what are some other organisms that are thriving in these hot environments? This right here is the shrub walker. The shrub walker is a very strange organism. Now, they are descendant from the sailed shrub singer and have definitely adapted over time. They have convergently evolved and taken up niches similar to that of an earth camel. Similar to a camel, they store fat in their tail in order to save up energy. And also, this can retain water as well. And have developed a longer head frill in order to support their, in order to regulate their body temperature more even during the cold nights. So they also developed mesothermic lifestyles. Now, males sport hardened, scale-like bones on their snout. This is mainly used to brawl. You can often find males headbutting each other like goats, and will just be clashing together oftentimes, and let out loud, blowing sings in order to intimidate their rivals. And they can often be found in large social herds, or not really herds, but more like harems, as the dominant male and usually other small male is accompanied by females and her calves. So you can often find these creatures very commonly in large herds, feeding among cactus fruits, and also, very strangely, the cactus bit itself, as they are not harmed because they have thick mats in their mouths, which means that they do not get spiked by the prickly cactus. Again, very similar to a camel. So, these organisms are thriving in the hot deserts of Ixrillis, and have developed long, lanky legs as well to walk long distances in order to find water, and have a very keen sense of smell in order to sniff out watering holes. So, the tripod chameleon and the shrub walkers are definitely thriving in the savannas and shrublands of Campolis. But like I said, there are still marshlands and swamplands that act like the watering holes of this area. So what are some life that entirely dwell in this existence? Well, this is one of them. This beautiful organism right here is the marsh crocodilian. The marsh crocodilian is a very long and terry organism. Now, these organisms are very similar to that of a saltwater crocodile, and will jump out of the water when they sense prey, usually organisms like the tripod chameleons or shrub walkers. And then they'll grab their neck, as this is usually the weak point, and drag them under the water. Once they've been dragged under the water, they will not be able to breathe. Instead, the marsh crocodilian will pin them down with their legs and begin to thrash violently in order to sever blood vessels in the neck. This usually kills the prey, allowing them to tear off chunks of meat and consume. So, they have a hunting style very similar to crocodiles, and during harsh environments and harsh stress, they can lower their metabolism down very, very low. Again, very similar to crocodiles. So, they are definitely thriving and have developed large scutes similar to a crocodile in order to swim more efficiently. But similarly, they are definitely not the top predators in these swamps. So, you might be wondering, well, what are the top predators if this strange crocodile-like creature is not? This is definitely it. Now, okay, this is the Pleopictus. Now, the Pleopictus, looking at it, it looks very, how would I say it? Very comical. They have a very long neck and very strange eyes. Now, they've convergently evolved with an earth pliosaur, developing long necks in order to, well, similar to a crocodile, ambush prey that are drinking water by jumping out and snatching them. So they are apex predators, as they'll also feed on the marsh crocodilian, tearing them up and eating them. So they are definitely thriving, but why do they have eyes on the top of their head? I mean, it makes them look so goofy. So the reason why they have this is to see them above the water in order to see if potential prey is near, oftentimes disguising themselves as a log. So they are actually relatively keen predators, and will stalk these rivers and prowl them too. So they are deadly efficient predators, descendant of the giant walking pictus. However, they don't walk anymore. But what are some other pictuses that walk? Well, this is one of them. This is the mud roller. The mud roller is a very humble and somewhat sort of cute creature. The mud roller, hence its name, rolls in mud. They roll in mud in order to moisten their skin and make water retention more apparent so they don't lose water. So you can often find these guys in small social packs, rolling around in the mud of riverbanks. These organisms are omnivores, feeding on small invertebrates like small fish and snails, and occasionally carcasses, but as well as cactus fruits and shrub tree leaves. So they're not too bad. And like their ancestors, they similarly slowly lunge around and claw and live in social packs, oftentimes finding them on the riverbanks most commonly. So if you're ever in a sort of marshy area of Axrillis, you can most likely find around 20 of these guys just rolling around and sitting in the riverbank, covered in mud. And they will usually be feeding and others just lazily sleeping. So they're a very common sight. So pay your appreciation to these somewhat cute creatures. And yes, that's a lot of organisms on Axrillis. And these guys are probably going to be the last ones of Axrillis. So definitely be more apparent to these organisms. So, okay, what is some other organisms out there? Well, like I was saying, okay, in this episode we're going to cover the islands and such, but we're also going to cover the ocean. Sorry about that, something was going on and it was glitching out. But we're going to cover the ocean next, as it is a very diverse area. Now, in the last episode we covered the coral reefs, but in this episode we are going to cover the open ocean and see how life is diversified. Shall we? Now, the oceans are very, very large, and similar to the coral reefs, have a great diversity. And now we have a very beautiful, peculiar creature. This is the dolphin-million. The dolphin-million is somewhat pretty cute. It has beautiful green eyes and a strange pattern of counter shading. And they are actually descendant from the river dolphin-millions that lived out on South Tongules and Strills, except now they live out in the ocean. Now, actually, they're not really descendant, but they're all into one big group. This group is known as, well, the dolphin-million group. It includes the river dolphin-million and these guys, as well as one other creature. These organisms are usually highly intelligent. So, yeah, highly intelligent. Like a dolphin. Their high intelligence allows them to do basic problem solving, and actually form bonds with certain individuals, and even teach their young through certain generations. And similarly, they do not go on land to reproduce, and have developed oviparity, so they retain the eggs within the womb and hatch them out, while not giving nutrients to them, unlike mammals. But they will still care for their young once they are birthed, and will care for them, even teaching them certain things in order to survive, making them one of the most intelligent species, even more intelligent than the lemur mammalians, as they are about as intelligent as a dolphin, can even sometimes be playing with certain other species, and even sometimes using coral and kelp as helmets in order to forage on the seabed. So they're very intelligent, mainly using the shells of snails in order to have as a mouth, as like a tongue guard when they're foraging. So they are highly intelligent and may be the next creatures that develop sapience, even though they're underwater. Now, that might sound a bit far-fetched, but they are definitely becoming the most intelligent. They can form bonds with certain things, and they are very curious and friendly. But since they're high intelligence, they can also be menaces, often seen killing other animals, mainly out of fear of fun, and also other animals too. So, well, it's not the best. Dolphins do a similar thing. However, don't worry, the dolphin millions don't do it that much. Instead, are mainly just peaceful, pond-dwelling species. Oh wait, I forgot. They are carnivores, so they will indeed hunt in packs. These packs consist of many individuals, up to 20, in order to hunt small organisms like fish and aquatic birds, which are their main diet, and they will dispatch them and gut them and remove their organs and eat their flesh. So, well, it's not that nice. It's just nature, guys. So nature's not Disney, and nature's not some evil horror revelage. It's just life, and this is what their life is. So you can often find these guys relatively commonly swimming through the open oceans, searching for things to play with, kill, or just spending their time around. Now we have a very strange, dumpy looking creature swimming through. This is the finfowl. The finfowl is a very strange life form indeed. Now, they are descendant from the coelamillion from the Arctic. They have now migrated into the warmer oceans and have changed their body plan a bit. They're not the top dogs anymore, but they're still thriving, very similar to seals. And similarly, still retain their oviparities, giving birth to live young, even though they don't really have to anymore. You can often find these guys in their flocks or pods, perching on banks. Now, they are actually a very playful and curious life form, being small omnivores feeding on plants and meat of invertebrates. You can often find them playfully clicking at each other in order to play and communicate. Take a listen. So they are a very sweet species and are actually relatively cute. Now, their comb has developed into a sort of dorsal fin, similarly to a shark. This allows them to efficiently steer through the water and makes them among one of the fastest. And this is for a good reason, as they are hunted by none other than the dolphin millions. So they need to be fast, as a pack of dolphin millions will indeed attempt to dispatch them. So they have to definitely be on alert. Even though they are very playful and curious, they don't have to be curious of many things. So they have to watch out in these open oceans, as they can be killed easily. Now we have the greatest organism on Compolus yet. Not because of intelligence, but because of sheer size. This is the Great Coelamillion. The Great Coelamillion is a descendant of the Blue Coelamillion, and is by far one of the largest life forms on Compolus yet. They are the largest coelamellian and, like I said, the largest life form yet. They are large filter feeders, very similar to Earth whales and have convergently evolved similar to the blue whales of Earth. However, while they are blue similar to a blue whale, they're more like a humpback whale and similarly filter feed, but also because of another reason of the great coelamellian. You see, they will save native life forms. So simple fin fouls that are attempting to escape the reign of a dolphin will actually seek refuge to these guys. They've been seen very occasionally rolling over on their back, letting flocks of fin fowls jump on their belly, and this makes it hard for the dolphin to get them, and usually they won't be able to, and thus will get bored and will find their luck elsewhere to hunt for other life forms, and thus making them safe. Even sometimes pushing them up on their tails or their head crest in order to help them. Their head crest is similarly developed into a sort of dorsal fin in order to help them steer, and their nostrils are on the top of their head in order to breathe. This act of kindness also makes them rather intelligent life forms, and this means that even though these organisms are reptiles and are like mesothermic, they still can show kindness even though they're not mammals. And you might be like, this is way too far-fetched. I mean, it's a large reptile, and even if it wasn't, no animal is just gonna show kindness to a species that's not even its. Well, that's actually not true. You see, well, they have been saving these small fin fowls and have been thriving, saving them from certain death. This is actually real on Earth. You see, humpback whales will save small seals from orcas in a very similar way to the great coelamellians saving small fin fowls from dolphin during their great time there. Dolphin are pack hunters and are similarly very intelligent. However, they have been shown to actually dislike the great coelamellians that are near, oftentimes harassing them as they do not like them, as they keep on saving the prey that they need to feed on. And it's a sort of rivalry in the ocean between a giant beast and a highly intelligent creature. However, I guess they are both very highly intelligent life forms. So, this is a very true thing, and it exists on Compulus as well, with the great coelamellian. This makes them also one of my favorite organisms on Compulus as well. So, they are definitely thriving with their acts of kindness across the ocean, saving small fin fowls and other small species from certain death, even actively seeking it out. And when they give birth via oviparity, they will keep watchful guard over their calf. So, they're a very kind and generous creature. So, you need to appreciate the great coelamellians that are out there on Compulus right now saving innocent lives that are not even their species. Now, this organism can also sometimes be saved by the great coelamellian, but they're a bit different. This is the spike-faced pictus. The spike-faced pictus, hence its name, has spikes on its face. Who would have guessed? Now, these spikes have actually evolved from their whiskers and have now become sharp spines. Now, these sharp spines, of course, are for defense, and they pump in a neurotoxin. This neurotoxin invades the bloodstream of the predators that are attempting to attack it. This can poison them and cause death even, unless the creature is too big, and it will cause bad sick symptoms, but it can cause death among smaller species. So these organisms are very similar to an earth pufferfish. So, yeah. And these spikes can even be puffed out by small little pockets of air that pump in, just like sort of shooting them out to show how sharp they are and usually scare off potential threats that are attempting to eat them. Again, very similar to an earth pufferfish, and have sort of convergently evolved with the pufferfish. So they are a very common sight, but if you see one, it's best not to approach them, unless you want to probably die from the neurotoxin in you, because it's very, very common. So you'll probably die in about a couple hours. So it's not the most pleasant fish, but it is certainly a fish. And similarly, during the mating season, males will develop bright red stripe and eye spot in order to appear beautiful to females. So very similar to salmon. So they still retain that, and they're still thriving. Also, their original beak of the ocean pictuses have now developed into a sort of incisor. So at least they still retain something like that. So these organisms are still thriving in this thing. However, during the more lighter parts of the waters, near the mainly top, you can find the beak royal. The beak royal is a type of ocean pictus king, which has also formed a whole new group known as the ocean kings, which is a very diverse and relatively clean group, with usually retaining sharp beaks in this, and usually pores that can explode out in order to shoot jets of water. And these guys have similarly developed a similar thing. Now, similar to Earth, sharks, they've developed a lateral cord in order to detect, well, most fish have already developed a lateral cord, but they've super heightened it in order to sense very much so, and are similarly predatory like sharks, and have a similar size. They stalk unsuspecting prey, like small invertebrates or small fin fowls, and then tear them open with their sharp beaks, tearing them through, and are very efficient, terrifying predators, and still retain their intelligence, similar to a manta ray, and are still very terrifying fish. Now, they similarly explode out pores of water and explode it like a giant jet, which can usually disorient prey, similar to an explosion. And also, during the mating season, males will develop large crowns made from rigid scales in order to attract females, giving their name, the beaked royal. So they are pretty much thriving in this nice ocean, and are thriving, like I just said, but soaring above the skies instead of in the water is a beautiful creature. This is the sea hawk. The sea hawk is a descendant of the flying fowls that have now migrated to open oceans and filled in empty niches. Now, very similar to an albatross, they fly for long distances and have a very long wingspan. And, well, they also nest on the coasts and perform nests, and oftentimes travel in great flocks. They are very similar to many types of seabirds in that they will dive in the water and grab prey like small fish and invertebrates and bring them back up. So they're very similar to seabirds. Oftentimes you can find them diving into the open oceans, grabbing something and swooping back out, using their somewhat like their wings into sort of flippers for a temporary time. So they can often be found swooping through the water or nesting on the seashores. You can also find them on the backs of the great coelamellians, picking small parasites off. So they're relatively common. And even though they're plentiful, even the fin fowls will oftentimes eat small ones. So at least the fin fowls can get some sort of something, but it's not on the great big ones. It's usually only small juveniles, and that's pretty much it, because if they tamper with the big adult, they're most likely going to get their eyes pecked at. So these beautiful seabirds are now the new dominant sea-typing birds on Campolis and can be found everywhere. And they're kind of cute. I mean, look at them. They're a big flying chicken that dives in the water and grabs up fish. Who would have thought that would have existed? Well, it does now. So yes, very beautiful and diverse. This makes the ecosystems a very lush environment and a very turning ecosystem, constantly shifting and constantly showing great prowess. Now, it's a beautiful munching sea, and other than the dolphin sometimes using their intelligence in order to kill, which is basically for many life forms, so I'm not really too mad about it, because you shouldn't be mad at a predator eating its food. I mean, you eat cows too. Well, unless you don't eat cows, then okay. But it's basically the same thing. However, while I have been talking about predators, I haven't really mentioned the main apex predators yet. However, every major ecosystem needs an apex predator. So what's the apex predator? Well, it could probably occur on one of the most unlikely candidates. This giant predator. This is the crocosaur. The crocosaur is a very large, keen predator that lives on the tops of the open oceans and dives down to the depths to hunt dolphin and fin fowls. These are the descendants of the small reef-dwelling ancestors which still exist, but their open ocean descendants are thriving. They have convergently evolved with mosasaurs and have developed a large size in order to hunt invertebrates and vertebrates. Now, these large predators are one of the biggest crocodilians yet. They're also a very smart organism. That's right, a lot of ocean organisms are developing high intelligence. Could this mean that the next organisms to evolve sapiens are in the ocean? Who knows? But the reason why they're so intelligent is because they oftentimes have to hunt in packs. These packs mean that they have to hunt basically the great coelomellians. That's right, they hunt in packs of around 10 individuals to take on the great coelomellian. That's right, even the great coelomellian has predators, as well as the dolphin-millions. Dolphin-millions will often run at the sounds of a group of crocodilian or crocosaurs feeding, and fin fowls will do the same. So, they are definitely a ravenous predator that hunts in these open oceans, searching for prey. So even the mightiest organism on Campolis yet, the great coelomellian, is not safe from these mosasaur-like predators. So, if you're up near the top of the water, you think you might be safe from the creatures that are lower beneath. Think again, because you might be mauled or eaten by these crocodile mosasaurs that live in packs. It's kind of scary, but it exists on Campolis. Now, at the seabed, you can find a very strange organism. This is the Yule speckled ita. Now, that is a very strange name, but it's what they are. The Yule speckled ita is a very strange name for an organism, but it's actually for a very big thing. Now, you see, the name, which I am now going to call them as the YSE from now on. Now, the YSE, they form a very large clade known as the ita, which includes other species of lobsters, and they are one of them. They contain themselves and the golden lobsters, and another one that I'm going to be covering in this episode. They similarly feed on small detritus on the seabed, and they are definitely very crab-like. Now, they feed and pump out little small balls of sand after they get done feeding. However, during the mating season, males will actually compete for females, And when this happens, before they brawl, something strange occurs. Their antennae form this strange, artful shape. This shape is similar to the shapes of DNA, sometimes given the name the DNA lobster. It is relatively unknown why this is, but it seems to be a way of intimidating the rival into assert dominance. But other than that, we have no real clue. But it's most likely this one, than that they use it to scare off potential competitors and to not make this fight seem so grisly. So they're a relatively common sight, oftentimes finding them across the seabed, just scouring around. And if you see one, they're most likely going to do this DNA shape with their antennae and will flare up. So, scary organisms. So yes, the Yule speckled Eta, or the YSE, are a thriving organism. Now, another group of their large clade is the kelp Eta. The kelp Eta is similarly an Eta, which is in the same group as the YSE, the golden lobster, and now this guy. Similarly to their name, they are actually predominantly herbivore, feeding on seagrass and kelp, and have developed a green color in order to blend in and not stand out among predators, which is actually working relatively well for them, so I'm glad to see that they're thriving in their nice seagrass diet, which is probably not the most nutritious, but, they're making it work. They're making it work. And so, you can find them just lunging around and thriving a lot. So, they're a relatively common sight, and they have turned their back pair of limbs into a sort of gonopod in which they use to hold on to each other during mating and also to carry their egg sac in. So they're relatively good mothers for arthropods, so they're making it work. I wonder what this clade may do in the far future. Who knows, So yeah, the Eta clade is doing pretty good. Now, slowly slinking around in the ocean floor is the bed pictus. The bed pictus is another type of fish. They have convergently evolved with the earth, wobbegong shark, and angel shark, appearing like the seabed around them and cultivating in sand. They usually wait for small invertebrates and fish to swim above them, and once this happens, they rear up and grab them and plop back down, consuming their meal and waiting for the next animal to come by. So they're rather simple within their hunting tactics, but they can still do it, and they can make it work. So, if you're ever on the seabed, you need to be careful, as there are hunting shark-like organisms dwelling at the bottom, waiting for you, and then snatching open your leg. Now, another fish that is thriving is the slim pictus. The slim pictus is... Now, it might have a very comical name, but it's, not lying, right? It's slim, right? Now, these organisms have convergently evolved with an earth eel, mainly eels like the moray eel, and are similarly very carnivorous, feeding on the abundance of snails and small lobsters, and limp, that oftentimes live in these open ocean seabeds. So, they are actually a relatively thriving species, and I feel that these organisms will lead up to some great things in the near future. Even though they're simple and eel-like, basically eel catfish that live in the ocean, I feel like they can thrive very, very goodly. So, keep an eye on these slim, eel-like pictus catfish, the slim pictus, as they may indeed lead up to some great things in the future. Or maybe I'm lying. Who knows? So yes, the fish are definitely thriving in the open ocean, which is to be expected. But what are some other organisms that are thriving? Now, some snails have been diversifying. Most snails have been in freshwater and habitats, but now some newer snails have been developing. This is the tusk snail. The tusk snail has developed tusks around their strange apparatuses near the mouth. Now, it's kind of similar to the tusks of an elephant, except it's used for hunting. That's right, it is used for hunting. They use the sharp spines on their tentacles to stab into small armored prey and squishy prey in order to kill it. Once it's been killed, they will consume it with its thousands of teeth. In fact, these tusks developed from the teeth in their mouth that have grown longer and sharper. So they are definitely efficient predators, although they're not the fastest, so they mainly feed on other snails. But hang on, what are some other snails these guys could be feeding on? I mean, there's not that many snail descendants, right? Oh wait, there is some more snail descendants. This. This is the snorpa. The snorpa is a very cute looking creature, I would say. Now, okay, just looking at this creature, this snail, its head kind of looks like them gummy sharks we used to get, and probably still do get at like gas stations and stuff. I mean, come on, it kind of does look the same, similar colors, but if we're going off more biological terms, it probably resembles the head of a pygmy sperm whale. These cute life forms often have developed 2 feet, making them actually relatively fast, allowing them to somewhat march. So they can get away from their predators, the tusk snail. However, tusk snail can oftentimes sneak up on them somehow and get them. But they're still relatively fast and cute. They are small herbivores and feed on plants and algae. Also, I would like for you to keep an eye on these small snails. I feel like they could also lead up to some very good things in the near future. But who knows, Who knows what could happen on the Compolis? Maybe all life forms go extinct, or all life forms reach space. Who knows? But one thing is for certain. These guys, I feel, will definitely lead up to some good things with their small, cute-like head and small little legs on their body, and their somewhat slim shell, allowing for more maneuverability. Now, swimming through kelp forests in the open ocean, you can find the sea mantis. Now, the sea mantis is a very strange invertebrate. Now, they have convergently evolved with an earth mantis, except they're underwater. And similarly to their cousins, or their ancestors, they are similarly not kelp eaters. They are omnivores, feeding on kelp, seagrass, and prey. They'll oftentimes wait on kelp or seagrass, waiting for small fish or small invertebrates near, or snails, then swimming with their back pair of limbs that have now turned into fins, allowing for great swimming locomotion, as well as the middle pair of limbs aid in turning, as well as the sort of dorsal fin that is now on the top of the carapace, and then with their mantis-like forelimbs to pin them down and feed. So they're actually a relatively efficient insect predator that lives in the oceans. Again, keep an eye out for these small, unassuming life forms. I also feel like they may lead up to some good things. So yes, we have oceanic bugs. I mean, you're not safe from bugs anywhere. So, that was the open oceans. There were a lot of diverse life forms in there. I told you it was going to be a bit long, and it is a very open ecosystem. But now we are traveling to a new area. South tongules. South tongules separated from North tongules during the meteor collisions and has its own unique fauna different from North tongules, similarly to how South America has different fauna from North America. Like, I live in North America, so I have to deal with bears, but if you live in South America, you have to deal with sloths, and, well, sloth bears, which are terrifying. However, South tongules is a very relatively drier area. It's not very jungle-like. Instead, it's very prairies. These prairies are home to some very unique organisms indeed. This is a strange organism running through the plains. This is the head-butting fowl. The head-butting fowl is a very peculiar life form. Now, they have convergently evolved with Earth's ancient Pachycephalosaurus, one of my favorite dinosaurs, and have developed their combs into hard structures, similarly to the cave fowl. However, instead of using it for echolocation, they now use it to brawl. Before fighting, the females will wait for the males to compete, and when the males are competing, they'll use their leg to scrape soil from the ground, and usually lowering their heads, showing off their bright head-butting equipment on their head. They will then let off a low rumble before they charge. Take a listen. They'll let off this low rumble, and then they'll howl like this. Once they've let out the scream, they'll then charge and begin to headbutt each other and scratch with their claws. And whichever male backs down and runs off is the loser. And the one that stands victorious will get to mate with the hen. And once this happens, the hen will then join the harem, and each harem will compete over time. So, it's a very competitive species. Very similarly to the Pachycephalosaurus. Also, very similarly, they have woven their feathers into a sort of tail and it can be stiff, allowing them to keep balance while running like this. Now this is a very lumbering beast roaming through South tongules. This is the horn singer. The horn singer is probably the largest land life form yet on Campolis, and one of the most unique. Now, similarly to rhinos, they convergently evolved like a rhino. However, comparing that they are a reptile and have a frill, they're more like Earth's Styracosaurus, and are very similar in size as well. These larger life forms often can be found lumbering with their partners, as they are monogamous. I cannot pronounce that, but I'll put it up on the screen. 3, 2, 1. And they mainly do this in order to keep safe from potential threats, which are mainly others, which will attempt to steal their partners. And in order to solve this issue, they may use their horns to stab into each other while exhaling loudly and rolling. And then using their sharp horn in order to stab into them in order to scare them off and potentially wound them out to death. So, while they seem peaceful, they're not the most peaceful and can be very aggressive. So, if you ever see one in the wild, though they look docile, and they probably are if you come near them, don't attempt to hurt them or attempt to provoke them, as they may very well kill you. Now, large lumbering life forms that are competing are not the only life forms on South tongules. Soaring through the air is the large painted clawfly. The painted clawfly is a very beautiful, deadly predator. They are actually descended from, well, a very species that we haven't talked about in a long while. The ripper butterfly, a species that we haven't talked about since episode 2 they finally have a new descendant that is roaming through South Tungulus. These are an equipped, sharp predator that soars through the skies with their sharp mandibles and claws. They oftentimes feed on small invertebrates and small organisms that they can catch and tear apart with their mandibles. However, they're not entirely carnivorous, sometimes even being somewhat omnivorous, feeding on grasses, and even with their proboscis, sometimes pollinating small flowers. So at least they somewhat do what the butterflies are intended to do, I guess. So, while they are still predatory, they can still somewhat be nice. Sorta. However, arthropods are definitely adapting to South Tungulus. This is the beautiful tiger swift-tern. The tiger swift-tern is a very gnarly predator. These organisms are the largest swift-tern yet and are by far the most threatening and menacing link. The tiger swift-tern, hence its name, has developed artful stripes on its exoskeleton. Now, these are descendant from the temperate slayer, and now have migrated up into these prairies, becoming a very dominant predatory creature, and a very lethal one to say. They've developed their stripes in order to blend in with the outlines of grass, and it can actually be relatively well. Oftentimes most species not seeing them and allowing them to get through and kill the species if they attempt to attack them. Now, they are very, very, very terrifying predator, oftentimes eating small invertebrates and even the calves of horned singers and chicks of small head-butting fowls. So, they are indeed a lethal predator to keep an eye on. And like I said, arthropods are definitely taking up their roles within Tungulus. Have I been saying Strills this whole time? I don't know. It's like 3 o'clock where I'm at right now, at night, or in the morning, so whatever. Now, this organism right here is the beautiful scythe lobster. The scythe lobster is a descendant of the originally herbivorous ancestor, which was a very small organism. Now, similar to scorpions, they've developed sharp scythes on their tails. They use this in order to impale their prey and then just eat their flesh and skewer them, which is a very lethal thing to do. And although they're terrifying like, they still have to routinely moisten their gills up with soil, so it can oftentimes be found them underground moistening that up near riverbanks. But they can still stay on land for around 5 hours, so they're very lethal. Very lethal. Their carapace resembles dirt, and their antennae resembles grass, so they can blend in relatively well. And combined with their long, sharp tail that they can use to stab with, it is a very scary arthropod that dwells in the grasses of South Tungulus. So yeah, terrifying predatory scythe lobsters exist. Now, on growing on trees, a very new plant grows. This is the milk vine. The milk vine is a descendant of the milkweeds and have developed beautifulness. They have to grow on other plants in order to stabilize structure, like a vine or beans, and they still extend their flowers in order to attract butterflies to pollinate them. So they are a very common plant, growing around many of the oak trees that grow in these prairies. Now this guy right here is the pollinator of this. This right here is the buzzfly. The buzzfly is a very, very beautiful creature. They somewhat have convergently evolved with an earth hummingbird hawk moth and have developed a very similar look and a very similar behavior. They pollinate the milk vines only. Any other flower they do not pollinate, only the milk vines. Now, one thing I'd like to say is that the milk vines are present on South Tungulus, Tink, but also on the new island chain near Strills, which is known as Prills, and also Exrilis. So any island, as well as South Tungulus, the milk vines are present. They're also present on Tungulus, so these guys are present on North Tungulus as well, and that means Strills. So they're present on the main half of the planet. Not yet Kamara and Melos, but they may get there eventually. I feel like there is a bright future for these small hummingbird-like butterflies. And there's actually been a lot more butterflies in this episode than many other episodes. Now, on the stony shores of South Tungulus, there are some very inquisitive life forms that thrive in here. Now, there can oftentimes be grass on these areas, and allows for many plant life to grow. So what are some life forms that may occupy niches near this? This guy. This guy is the great giant wyvermillion. The wyvermillion is the greatest giant, it's the biggest flittering chameleon yet. They've developed long wings to fly and are very large in size, of around 7 to 6 feet tall. They are very similar to Earth's ancient Quetzalcoatlus. However, and very similar to the Quetzalcoatlus, they don't really fly all too much. Though they can fly, they don't like to, and they mainly spend their time. Unlike the Quetzalcoatlus, which were probably carnivores, these guys are mainly small, not very small, but they are omnivores, feeding on fish, invertebrates, grasses, and shrubs. And that's basically all their diet is. And they can indeed fly, however they spend most of their time not doing it. It has become so apparent that their original finger-like digit has now developed into a sort of hoof, so for better walking locomotion. But again, keep an eye on these life forms. I feel like they could spread like clockwork across the planet, which is a very beautiful way to touch on this wyvermillion, which is very similar to the wyverns of Earth's mythology. Now we travel away from South Tungulus, which has all the fauna that we can mention, and we move to the small island chain off the coast of Strills. This island chain is known as Prills, and Prills, even though it might be small, it is definitely mighty. And while it does have trees, it is mainly dominated by bamboo forests. That's right, bamboo forests. And while it's spread off from Strills, it still contains some life forms. So the small-tailed jungle fowls are mated to the islands. The tree pictus make it to the islands. The small molefowl made it to the islands. And even the strilomillions made it to the islands, as well as a creature that we haven't mentioned in a long time. These small sand or shrub chameleons, too. And these are the life forms that have made it to the new Prill Islands and will have their own unique descendants. Starting off with the tree pictus's descendants, this is the tree skipper. The tree skipper is a very peculiar, interesting life form. Now, very similar to a gecko, they've developed toe pads, allowing them to grip through trees and walk on surfaces that you usually wouldn't be able to by many species. But they also are very similar to an iguana, because they have scales like a lizard, but also because These no longer need to go down to the forest floor to lay their eggs in water, but instead they now lay eggs, hard shell eggs, similar to the birds and reptiles of Compolus. So they are definitely adapting. And they are actually carnivores, feeding on small invertebrates and other small tree-dwelling tree pictuses and their descendants that might be up here, jumping with their back pair of limbs and pinning them down with their front pair of limbs, allowing them to bite with their strong jaws, allowing them to thrash, similar to a iguana. So, they're definitely thriving in the trees of prills. Another life form that is dwelling in the trees of prills is the beautiful firetail pictus. The firetail pictus is a very strange, peculiar life form. They have developed bright fan of fuzzy fur-like filaments on their tails that resemble fire. Now, this is mainly for fighting. Similar to monitor lizards, they use their tail to slash, similar to this picture of this monitor lizard slashing this jaguar. They similarly do this, but before they do this, they flare out these hairs with this fire-like appearance in order to scare off potential threats, and they'll even let off a hissing noise. Take a listen. So yeah, they flare out a large fan in order to scare off threats, and if they come near, they whack them with it. They have small microscopic barbs in it that are sharp and leave in the skin, causing vast irritation. So they are definitely equipped to survive within the trees. And similarly, they're small herbivores, feeding on plants and sometimes occasionally bugs, but they're still mainly considered herbivores. Now, with all this abundant bamboo on the ground, something has to eat it, right? Now, one of the first animals to get here were actually the small burrowing molefowl. So the small burrowing molefowl might actually become the ones to eat the bamboo, which is crazy. Oh my god. This is the beautiful, beautiful great creature, and is somehow so hard to comprehend that they were once small moles, but now they're no longer that. This is the bamboo beast. The bamboo beast, or bamboo herder as they're also called, is one of the strangest creature. Well, I've been calling them the bamboo herders. They're not entirely called that, but they're mainly called the great ground fowl. The great ground fowls are one of the best species out here. Because, just look at them. These organisms have convergently evolved with an earth. Well, it's hard to believe they were once small little burrowing birds, first of all, but also they've convergently evolved with, an earth, okay. I want you to take a guess on what they could have evolved from. Got your answer? Okay. They convergently evolved with pandas. Yeah, that's right. Pandas. Because they feed on bamboo. Well, they don't entirely feed on bamboo. While they do indeed feed on bamboo, they also feed on mangoes. So there's not entirely bamboo, but they will eat bamboo. But, okay, of course, they also convergently evolved with the ground sloth. So, yeah, you got me. These large life forms live in social harems, consisting of usually 1 to 2 males and a dozen of females, and their small chicks. These organisms are in build similar to a gorilla, and have a very strong punching power, even though they only have 2 fingers on their limbs, with sharp claws too. So this makes them very strong and even deadly creatures at some points and times. And similar to a ground sloth, they swipe like a bear in order to scare off creatures and can sometimes kill them. And even though they've been consistently eating bamboo all day, their beak are robust and not really for pecking, but for biting, able to crush bone. So they're actually very strong. It's hard to believe that they super quickly spread out from a small mole into a large ground sloth-like bird so quickly. But they have to scramble to fill in the empty niches. Now, they were going to spread up into other niches until a newcomer arrived. A descendant of the small-tailed jungle fowl. This is the great bamboo walker. The bamboo walker is a descendant of course, the tailed jungle fowl, and are large and bulky. These life forms travel in large flocks and can often be found very commonly feeding on bamboo, leaves, grass, and bananas and mangoes. So basically they are herbivores. They've developed their large throat pouch, similar in convergence with the shrub singers. And similarly, they can make loud, very, very complicated vocal cues. Take a listen. So yeah, they communicate very loudly. They no longer really mimic species anymore, unlike their small ancestors, but they still make loud noises. These organisms are very built similar to the T-Rex. However, unlike the T-Rex, they are herbivores. So, they're kind of cute. Even though they're herbivores, if you attack one or agitate it, they'll give you one good fury kick, and that's enough to break your jaw. So, do not get them agitated, or they will kick and bite you. So, it's not pleasant, but they will do it. So be careful, because even herbivores are dangerous. In fact, herbivores cause more kills per year than carnivores. Just saying. So these large, bulky herbivores, the bamboo walkers, are definitely thriving on the small islands of Prills. But they have to worry, for there are always predators. This is the razor mimicker. The razor mimicker is a very opposing predator. Now, similarly to their ancestors, which could mimic any voice similar to a lyrebird, they have turned this into a grim hunting strategy. They have learned to mimic the voices using their complicated throat pouch in order to mimic the sounds of other species in order to lure them in and eat them. Let's say this is the call of a bamboo walker. And this is a razor mimicker mimicking it. It is very, very similar, and most species won't be able to tell the difference, and thus meaning that a bamboo walker may approach the razor, which I'm going to call them now, the razors, or the razor mimicker, in order to attack. They have developed, well, their name is razor, it comes from their razor-like beak, but also because of their claws. Their claws are very similar to many types of theropod dinosaurs, like Utah raptor and velociraptor. However, while there are definitely terrifying predators roaming around, there still could be time for many great things. This is the puptus. The puptus, you might be wondering, what is this? Is this a chameleon? This don't look like no chameleon. What is this? Looks weird. What is it? Well, it is actually something you might not expect. It's a fish. That's right. It is a descendant of the tree pictus. However, it's no longer living in the tree. It is living on the forest floor. While the tree pictuses were originally small and sort of mesothermic, not really, but sort of, they began to grow on the ground and have become, instead of reptile-like, synapsid-like. and they're developed very similarly to like synapsids, thus resulting into the puptis. The puptis are very small and peculiar, and have begun to dig little dens near the bases of trees in order to house their young. They similarly reproduce via oviparity in order to make predators not be able to eat their hard-shelled eggs, while a creature that lives up in the trees won't have to worry about such things. So they give birth to live young in order to protect their young. They are small omnivores, feeding on plants, moss singers, and invertebrates. So they're very peculiar. Now, I definitely want you to watch out for these creatures. Though they're small and kind of pointless as of now, I feel that they will lead to some beautiful things in the far, far future. But who knows, Maybe they would go extinct in a couple thousands of years. But I don't think so. Now, in the deeper parts of the forest, you can find this small, peculiar creature. This is the moss singer. The moss singer is a descendant from the small sand chameleon or shrub chameleon, which were small and were the descendants or ancestors of the shrub singers and the sand shrub singers. But they are still cold-blooded and are lizard-like and are thriving. And, well, okay, nothing much to really say about them, except they're just green versions of their ancestors that still make their tiny little chirps. Take a listen. So they're kind of cute and live in moss and make chirps like a bird. So yeah, nothing much to really say about them. So yeah, I'm thinking about ending the episode right now. I mean, it's already an hour long, so what's even the point? Alright, goodbye guys. Wait, I forgot. I gotta cover these guys. This is the Compolus tweety. The Compolus tweeties are a large group of birds that are very interesting in that the fact that they are strangely convergently evolved with the birds of paradise. Birds of paradise are birds that live in tropical areas and have developed many unique forms. Similarly, the Compolus tweeties have developed many new forms and are descendants of the flying fowl. On the top left, you have the green speckled warbler. The green speckled warbler has developed a very complicated call to attract mates. Take a listen. Now, on the top right is the great aardvark. The great aardvark also has developed a very unique, special mating calls. Take a listen. Now, in the middle of all this is the peacock. The peacocky is also developed a very strange adaptation. However, instead of flying like the rest of the Compolus tweeties, they're actually flightless. However, not to worry, as they can run up to 20 miles per hour, which is pretty fast. And similar to peacocks, they flare out their feathers. Take a listen to their calls. Now, at the bottom left is the midnight one. They're actually nocturnal and come out at night. Listen to their beautiful speckled calls. And at the very bottom right is the brown rainbow eyes. The brown rainbow eye is another very beautiful creature. Now take a listen to its mating call. So, the Compolus tweeties have developed various mating calls, which derived from their original rooster-like crows, to now beautiful mating calls, and have diversified into many new types. The Compolus tweeties are a very beautiful, diverse group of birds, and I cannot wait to see what they could become in the future. So, the Compulus tweeties are also on every single island of Compulus yet, and are also on South Tungulus. So, you know what, guys? I'm probably going to end the episode now. I'm pretty tired, and it's about time for me to go to bed. So, good night. Wait a second. I forgot a descendant from these guys. Okay, guys, since it's been such a long time, I will cover a descendant of these guys, the Strilomillions. Huh. They don't look too interesting. I mean, they just look like a bigger version of them. However, this is single-handedly the most important one of the species we have covered yet in this episode. And you may be wondering, well, Jordan, how? It just looks like a bigger version of the Strilomillion. And that it is. But they have developed something no chameleon has yet. Dare I say it? They have developed sapiens. That's right. They have developed sapiens. Now, let me go ahead and tell you how they developed sapiens. Now, the original Strilomillions were semi-domesticated, living on the backs of the elephants. However, while they were very intelligent, about as intelligent as a crow, the wild variants that eventually became domesticated had one main thing. They were actually growing dumber due to more cuteness and other things, similar to how we have done animals in the future. I mean, look at a pug and compare that to a wolf. Yeah, look how much we de-evolved that thing. A similar thing happened to many Strilomillions. But the wild ones that made it to that Prills Island adapted and let their intelligence grow. Because of the limited resources on the island, they had to adapt, and thus developing intelligence, the gift of thinking. The wild ones found that the new solutions and new problems to their new environment were good, especially for their new problem thinking, and thus allowed them to diversify into a new sapient species on the islands of Prills. Now, we have two sapient species on Compulus, a chameleon and a bird. So this is insane. Now, let's go straight into it, because I'm already almost 2 hours into this and I'm very tired. So let's get right into it. Now, they have stink sacs similar to their ancestors, which used like a skunk, but now, instead, it's mainly used for communication. They can smell each other's sociochemicals in order to determine one's health and status, familiarity, and mood. So they use scent very much. So you can often find these guys sniffing their cloacas. Well, I mean, it's not too weird. I mean, oh, okay. They can oftentimes also spray it on certain leaves, similar to tribes of hyenas, in order to communicate to other members of the kind using chemical scents. Thus meaning that these guys have actually a very keen sense of smell, keen to mammals. Again, very similar to hyenas. And while chemical scent is a very good thing, developing specialized glands near their cloaca, and yeah, they are very good with communicating with signals, and that was the first form of communication. And while the Strilomillions did have sounds, take a listen, this wasn't the best idea because of the predator known as the razor mimicker. The razor mimicker mimicked the voices of the ones that communicated more with vocal cues, and thus got killed off, meaning that they had to adapt. Instead of communicating via vocal cues similar to humans, they developed different. Now, humans communicate with a large variety of facial expressions. Some of these are very honest signals, meaning that they cannot be flexed voluntarily, so it's a very honest signal, especially with frowning and other things. And these guys, they do not have very complex muscles within their heads or faces. Instead, it's mainly in their hands, as their ancestors were originally arboreal, and now since they live on the ground, they also have very manipulative hands, and they'll use that to their advantage. And also, another aspect of body language is color. Chameleons change color in order to defy various differences. When a chameleon is blue, this usually means that they are very happy or even excited. Chameleons will also turn blue when they're very happy and excited. Chameleons turn red in order to assert dominance and appear larger and more intimidating. Chameleons will also turn red when they are angry and frustrated, and also to intimidate rivals. They could also do this when they are scared. When they're green, of course, they are neutral and are just kind of minding their own business. When they're gray, they are sick and old. Chameleons will also use this as the communication. So chameleons will already have a basic form of communication, and the chameleons will use this to their advantage. So body language may be the main form of communication. But since now they live in like tribes, how could they take this even further? They may develop sign language. This sign language can allow them to communicate without using their vocal cues, and also allows the predators to not notice them. This is what their hand looks like. It usually has 3 claws digits that are opposable at the top and 2 thumb-like appendages near the bottom. Now let's take a look at some of their sort of hand signatures. When they close the first 3 pairs of claws, this usually indicates water. They mainly do this when they want water, if they see water, or if it's raining. An animal means when the middle digit closes downward and forms a very strange shape. This means animal or food. Means if they see an animal, they make this symbol. If they want food, they have this symbol. Or if they see food, they make this symbol. If they see a threat, like a predator or a rival clan, they will contain their hands outward, but they'll move it up and down like a scratching motion, in order to indicate that it's a new threat, like a new predator or a rival clan. When they put this over and shows this means they're angry and frustration. They also usually do this when they're angry, so it sort of looks like they're flipping us off. And when they put their limbs like this, it means that they want to mate with you and love you. So, yeah, it's very nice. So, this is the basic form of sign language, and these are the basic form of needs. However, they may form different types of grammar with sign language, similar to humans. So, sign language will be the main form of communication for these species. Now, they are thriving and adapting into these harsh conditions of prills. And they are actually very good caretakers to their young, teaching their young everything they need. They usually have up to 2 offspring. However, sometimes they can have only 3 or 1. Now, similarly, they are mesothermic, meaning that they can regulate their body temperature to a relatively comfortable certain degree. So they don't really have to worry about getting frozen up too much. They soon may become warm-blooded, who knows. But they are still very good caretakers of their young, and teach them all certain things, like chimpanzees teaching one another how to smash stuff with rocks. Chameleons do this, however, it's to a more extent since now they are sapient. So, they can teach their young simple things like how to do sign language, how to make spears, oh, perhaps I said too much, and how to do certain other things of the sorts. Now, since they have more manipulative appendages other than elephants, they may actually have technological growth better than them, sharpening rocks on larger rocks to creating sharp rocks, unlike elephants which didn't do this. Instead, they just sharpened sticks. which eventually would wear down over time, but rocks would take a lot longer too. So rocks are very keen for their intellect. Very similar to ancient human tools, sharpening them into sharp spears like rocks. They can use these sharp rocks for two different purposes. The main reason, and most common, is to make a sharp spear-like knife. This is used for hunting and self-defense, and most individuals carry it in case they get attacked by a rival clan or they need to defend themselves from predators or if they're hunting. They usually tie it together with plant fibers from bamboo and other plants and reinforce it down, thus allowing for an efficient tool in order to craft and use it. So, they have developed a very complicated sharp knife or like tool. They may also develop it into a sort of necklace. This necklace could also be used for self-defense or calculating small problems, but it is mainly used for a sort of fashion and to signal wealth. They may also leave other sort of necklaces into baskets, so when tribes are out gathering stuff, they can gather stuff. As these creatures are actually nomadic, meaning that they have not developed agriculture yet, and move from one place to another, searching for abundant prey and abundant game. So they may use baskets to collect certain things, like eggs of other species, the meat of other species, plants, and other things of the sorts, as they are mesocarnivores. So, they are still somewhat thriving and are actually doing relatively well. They may also sharpen and break certain rocks to form bowls. These bowls will be used for grounding up plants and meat, and they may also be used for another form, art. They may actually be a bit more artistic than the elderfowls. Elderfowls don't really pay too much attention to art, as they're not really relatively good at it. But since these guys have more manipulative appendages, they could probably produce a bit more complicated art than just this simple stuff. By grinding up simple plants like mangoes and such, they can make different colors for the different species and can portray them very well. And since they now live in sort of cave-like areas, they can paint more intricate stuff and other things, putting moss in their houses as well as leaves in order to add a sort of decoration and such, but they can still paint. This painting right here depicts the puppis, and symbols seemingly are words, and by the looks of it, this drawing is meant to resemble them as pests, taking and stealing their stashes of mangoes and meat that they have, considering them as pests. The red points around the body seem to be the clear areas to attack when attacking one. So, nice. This is another simpler art piece. It shows a ground fowl attacking it. This seems to be during a hunting expedition, and during the symbols, they seem to say that they were losing the battle against the great beast. This one is a bit more spiritual. It shows a dead one being stabbed with spears, while one shows off with extreme emotion, showing off a staff with bright colors and symbols. This most likely means that they believe in a form of the afterlife. This is an earlier painting, and it shows a pack or herd or flock or whatever you want to call it of bamboo walkers and razor mimics near it, somehow luring them in. It seems that these Prilomelians were just passing through though, and were not bothered. This art symbol shows the fingerprints of the species, and seems to wield some strange power, as a mango staff is shown, plants, and the moon as well. So, it's strange. This art piece shows also a ground fowl in the species hunting. A tailed jungle fowl is here in the picture as well, showing that they are still present. So, I guess that's quite nice. I guess the ground fowls are their main source of food. And thus, they can make actually a bit more complex art than the elderfowls, even though the elderfowls are still rather intelligent. They can oftentimes tell stories with art, and since they can teach it to the next generation to teach them others. Here we see a father teaching their kids how to hunt by using drawings, and they use it to light a torch. However, only one kid seemed to be paying attention, while the rest are sort of goofing off. Now, fires are very abundant on Campolis. Campolis has a very high oxygen level, similar to the Carboniferous, and wildfires are very, very deadly. And since fires may definitely happen on prills, the Prillamillions may actually use this to their advantage. They may see the blazing wildfires and may think, could I use this to my advantage? And they could. They could harness the fire by sharpening sticks and rocks and banging them together to create sparks. And against dried out leaves and grass and bamboo, they can create bonfires. These bonfires will be mainly used for spiritual things, but as well as for cooking. So, they have now created fire, and they were one of the first sapient species to do such a thing. They may also create torches in order to light their way, and also to attack other cults to burn them. So, they definitely may use fire for various things. So, fire is a very good achievement among the Prillamillions. Now, looking back at some more artwork, we can see that these other symbols include a rainbow. The rainbows are, of course, very common on Campolis and is very wet and humid, and they may see rainbows as actually a form of a god. That's right, they may worship rainbows. And this might seem a bit silly or stupid, but if you think about it, chameleons change color all the time, and they may see the color be given to them from this god, so they may see it as a god, and thus worshipping it. This would explain why the chameleon in that previous had a very colorful staff. It may be a form of priest. So they may worship this god and other things, forming it known as the Polaria. The Polaria is now their god, and they worship it, believing that it has unwielding power, and that is from a different dimension. The dimension was closed off, and it found itself in this new dimension. It found this new world and claimed it as its new one, and it found the new sapient species, and decided to give it power, and thus developing its color among them. And this is the reason why they are insapient in the first place. So, they definitely worship rainbows. So, that's quite nice. And, yeah, they still are developing sharp spears, and that will work definitely, by sharpening rocks and such. So, while they have definitely made very much so technological advancements, even more than the Elephals, so could they outcompete them? Well, not yet, as they are not reached the mainland and are still occupying their small little island homes. However, this is a very key species. A new sapience has arrived. A new order of life has entered Campolis. From their beautifulness as taking care of their young. So, they may also find creatures cute. Now, okay, they may find creatures like these small tree skippers cute, as they somewhat resemble their babies, as well as these guys. They may also find them cute. And they actually, some cultures, may find the Puptus cute, even though it is a sort of pest. So, they may find creatures cute similar to the Amorphous. However, they are a bit more technological advanced. And so, these guys are definitely thriving and developing small cultures and clans all across the Prill's small island chain. And thus, we end this episode off, leaving Prills behind and its beautiful sapient species, the Prillamillions. As you can see, many forms of life have evolved and diversified in this episode, and have grown to new sizes and new forms. And, well, they are definitely going to get to be different in the next episode. The next episode, we are going to go to Melos and Kamara, as well as the cold Arctic. And, guys, I may do a Q&A for 70 subscribers if we get to it. So, if you want to ask me questions, you can. But other than that, have an awesome day. And, oh my gosh, this video is 2 hours long. Wow, that's a lot of videos. But again, see you next time. Bye bye.